everybody, welcome to my review of Deathwish 1974, a Charles Bronson movie. It's made by Michael Winner. So Deathwish is one of those movies that's, to me, I would say if I had a go-to movie and it was my favourite movie, this would be the one. I just like the whole grittiness of this movie, the reality of it, because it was realistic around that time. I'll explain a bit more about that in a little while. But this movie is one of those hard-hitting movies. So the movie itself is a revenge movie, basically about vigilantism. It's considered by some to be a controversial. There's reasons for that. There's politics, which I don't really want to go into on this channel, but sometimes it's unavoidable, but it's not my belief, it's kind of what the film expresses. It's also a movie of how humans react, how we are as people, and the consequences of what we do. But it is a great movie, Deathwish. It's one of those movies, it was around that time period where we had, they really socked it to the viewer, so to speak. It was, you had horror movies like Hills Have Eyes, I Spit on Your Grave, Last House on the Left. The kind of movies where they didn't really leave much to the imagination, and you went away pretty much feeling quite sick to your stomach about what you had seen, because it was pretty brutal. You know, most of these films were around this time. I mean, I would have said Deathwish 2 was much more brutal than this one in the aspect of what you see and how it makes you feel, because they up their game in Deathwish 2, but obviously we're reviewing the original Deathwish today. But yeah, so it's one of those movies where you walk away thinking, was it right, was it wrong, and what was it about? And that's where the controversial part came in. It's set around a time when there was no real CCTV, and if there was, it was very grainy, and that's why I'm saying it would have been more realistic around that time, because it would have been probably, you know, you would have got away with crime if you hadn't got caught. As to say, there wasn't any CCTV. DNA was probably used, but again, there was great elements of crime. So it's set in New York, and it's about a gentleman played by Charles Bronson called Paul Kersey. Paul Kersey is an architect and family man, and he's just trying to live his life, you know, like we all do. So I'm going to do some spoilers. I think most people have seen this movie, so I'm not too fussed about spoilers, because I think that if anything, people have probably seen the Bruce Willis remake as well, which I thought was okay actually, to be fair. It wasn't too bad. I just think the only thing about the remake was it was in an unrealistic time where you'd get caught really easily. It's just so, people who commit crimes nowadays, it's just so easy to get caught due to the technology and how far we've come. But yeah, so the remake was pretty good. But the original, as I said, Paul Kersey, he's an architect, family man, and New York at that point in time in the story is going through a spate of crazy muggings, as they like to call it. We have robbery in the UK, but muggings, we used to use the word mugging over here one time. So people getting robbed, basically, violent robberies. And Paul Kersey and his daughter, it loses his daughter and his wife throughout the series. But obviously in the first movie, his wife and daughter, they're shopping, they go out shopping, and the delivery service back then, they put your details into a bag for the delivery man, and during his time in the supermarket, these street thugs or punks, whatever you want to call them, are going through obviously people's groceries and getting their details of where they live, and they happen to follow Paul Kersey's daughter and wife home, where they gain entry by making out their delivery people, and then obviously a horrific scene takes place where they're violently assaulted in ways that I don't really want to talk about on here, but you can use your imagination. But Paul Kersey's wife ends up losing her life in the incident, and his daughter is, what I can only imagine, severe PTSD to the point where she never speaks again. Throughout the first and second movie, she doesn't speak at all, really. She's just in a state of wake, but she's not communicating. So Paul Kersey does what anybody does, and he goes to the police. And the police try to reassure him that there's some hope that he'll find out who they are, they'll catch them. But obviously, in that time period, they probably had a lot of unsolved crime around that time, because it was just, America's huge, isn't it? New York alone was a huge place back then, and I suppose the police went on good old-fashioned police work. They knew the local criminals and they knew who they were. But on this occasion, it didn't pay off. So Paul Kersey's been going back and forth to the police, trying to get the answers that he needs, but it's like the police just don't have them. And he starts to lead a pretty lonely existence on his own. But constantly in his mind, he's probably thinking, what could I have done? Could I have done more? And could I have defended them? Why wasn't I there, sort of thing? I think we'd all feel like that, wouldn't we, in that sense? And then he obviously starts to get feelings about revenge, because he's a normal man. He just goes to work, but he has got some skeletons in his closet, which I'll talk about later on. So he's a normal man, just wants to go to work and come home and do all his things, but some baddie's taking it away. It happens a lot in life, and so Paul Kersey starts to get ideas of revenge. There's a great scene in the film where he goes into the bank and he changes up, I think it's like $20 or something in American money. I don't really know American money, being from the UK, but he changes it into what I think is quarters, is it? I don't know if you call it quarters or pennies, what we call it over here. And he puts them in a nylon sock, like the old snooker ball in a sock kind of effect, and he puts that into his pocket, and he goes out at night, and obviously he walks around trying to make himself a target. And he does eventually come across a robber who comes at him, and he thinks about it, and you can see it, and all of a sudden he swings the sock, bang, knocks out the robber. He then runs off home, and you can, in the house, he's actually feeling some sort of win, something that he's got back in his life. And it's a brilliant scene, because he's angry and he's swinging the sock round and he breaks it, but he's kind of celebrating what he's done, and he's thinking, now I can do this, I can make things better. And then the film switches up a little bit, because this is the point where he gets sent out to Tucson, which is, I really like the scenes in this film. I don't know if it's actually filmed in Tucson, but it's quite like cowboy country. And he goes out there to do an architect project for a cowboy real estate guy who wants to build like condos on his property, on his land. But he's obviously an environmental guy at the same time, because he doesn't want to change the land very much. He wants space for the cattle and the people, which is a cool scene. So Kersey has to use his skills to architect to plan it out. But the great thing about that scene is that Kersey comes in with the attitude of the concrete jungle sort of attitude. Well, we just build buildings, we just rip it all down. And the cowboy doesn't want to know, because obviously he comes from a land where it's free to roam and there's open spaces. So he has to work with Kersey, and Kersey's been sent there anyway, just to take his mind off of the whole situation. His work have done that, to try and get him, because he's gone back to work too quickly. Like a lot of us do, don't we? When we have bad things, we go back to work too quickly, whether we lose a loved one or we just want to get back to work, don't we, and get on with it. That's what Kersey does, doesn't he? So he's out there, and this cowboy takes him around, and he's actually enjoying himself, but he's got on his mind what he wants to really do, and it's not architecture. It's getting revenge. It's getting these people, find out who they are, or trying to get some bit of relief. And he goes onto the shooting range with this cowboy. And this is where you find out a bit about his past and the skeletons in his closet. He explains to him about being from New York. And guys, this is where it gets political, and I don't really know. I stay out of this because I'm not American. I'm from the UK. We have our own problems in the UK, but certainly not to do with, as bad with firearms or whatever it is in America. But this is where it touches on a bit of the, should I say, gun control versus gun carry, open carry states sort of thing, and all that sort of politics of it. Because Kersey reveals at the shooting range with this guy Ames that he was a conscientious objector during the Korean War. So he served in the forces, he was a medic, but obviously he was one of those people who he was following orders as a soldier, maybe didn't so much believe in what was going on, but just followed orders and fought for his country sort of thing, as it is with a lot of people again. But it turns out that Kersey is a crack shot. He really is a crack shot. And Ames, the cowboy man, he's really surprised because he can't believe it. He's saying, you're a funny conscientious objector. How can you be like this? And Kersey explained to him that when he was young, his dad was a hunter. They were very into firearms. They were very into guns. However, I think his father was killed in a hunting accident involving a gun, which put Kersey off using guns. So he said he never touched guns again, or didn't want to touch guns again, or have anything to do with them. So at that point, he's shooting the targets, and he's probably picturing them being the people that have ruined his life, changed his life. And so then he completes the architectural project. It's a success. He's going to go back to New York, and the guy Ames, the cowboy guy, slips a present into his luggage, tells him that, because flying back then up to really a certain point of our time now, you could took anything on a plane. It was so open, it was so dangerous. But Kersey obviously had his luggage checked onto the plane, and in it was this present from Ames. When he gets back to his property, he finds out that it's a cowboy style gun, pistol. And he's now got himself access to a weapon in a gun control state. It's New York is really strict on guns, I believe. And that's where the political part comes in, I was talking about, of gun control versus open carry. So, not my opinion. I've really got an opinion on it, as I say, from the UK. So he then goes out with this gun in the evening, into the night, wandering around, and I think he goes into Central Park. So he's in Central Park, and he's wandering about, and this guy comes up to him with a gun. Give me your money, sort of thing. Kersey turns and shoots him, levels him. And that's the first part. He goes home. He's sick with adrenaline, and this is where the film really picks up, because he's now taken a life, hasn't he, of one of these muggers. Not the ones that affected him, because throughout the film, which is really strange, you don't really hear from them again. So it's not a revenge movie as in getting your revenge. It's just getting revenge as in muggers and robbers and criminals in general. So yeah, he kills this guy basically. That's where it all starts. And there's a classic scene, because during the movie, like I say about classic scenes, there's quite a lot of scenes in this movie. Like, one of the biggest bugbearers for me was his son-in-law throughout the movie. His son-in-law Jack. He's like this whiny guy who wants to put his head between his knees and hope it goes away, shut his eyes and hope it goes away, after what's happened to his wife, Kersey's daughter. And throughout the movie, I think Kersey struggles with the fact that he's not getting any backing from him. He's not getting any real backing from him because his daughter's unable to cooperate with the police because of her condition, because of the things that have gone on. She's, like I say, she's totally proper PTSD, shell shock, like more or less. She can't speak, and you know, he's just visiting her and agreeing with everything the doctors say, and I think Kersey's getting frustrated about it because he's not running it by him, or they're not communicating well. But like I say, he's one of these people who just shuts his eyes and hopes it goes away. And throughout the movie, he just whines and whines. And it's one of the only things that if the guy was meant to play that character, then brilliant. His acting was fantastic. I think he's actually no longer with us now, as is the same with Charles Bronson. And we're going to go on to the cop now, the detective, Ochoa, the guy who plays Ochoa, Detective Ochoa. He was a fantastic actor in this movie. He made this movie probably on the same level that Bronson did. I mean, if he hadn't been in this movie, I think it probably wouldn't have been as good as it was. The old Inspector Ochoa is in the briefing room with all the cops, and it's really good the way he sort of runs it down and explains it to the officers. This is how we're going to investigate it. You know, we've got this guy who's a crack shot. We don't know who he is, but we know he's a crack shot. Where did he learn to shoot? So let's start with the army. So he says, let's go through all the soldiers we've got who have been victims, or family members have been victims of these muggings or robberies, because he immediately thinks it's someone who's after muggers. Because obviously when they find the first body, just shot, nothing's taken, there's no real explanation for why this guy's dead. And he's gone down the road of believing that it's a revenge killing. And that's how he starts off the whole vigilante hunt, because they start referring to him as the vigilante. And he goes after him saying, let's look at all the soldiers who have been victims of robberies, muggings, attacks. And then we'll break it down to the wars for different ages. And he says, obviously, let's start with Vietnam and then move on. So that's how he progresses it. And then he tells the cops to tell the press that they've got loads of leads, because they've got no leads at this point, they've got nothing. Obviously, he explains it to them that if they go down this route, they've got loads of leads. So he's obviously a very seasoned inspector, knew what he was talking about, and really put in. And he manages to narrow it down by the killings in the areas. He does the geography of it, the names he's got already of the previous forces people. Then there's a breakthrough in the movie, which I thought was really good. And there's a scene where it's in a lot of pictures, there's a lot of, I think it was a really sort of scene of how far he had gone. It was when he's on the subway train and he's got the bag of groceries, expensive looking, he's got a nice suit on, making himself a target, Kersey. And he's sitting there waiting on his subway train. He's obviously been riding the subway train. And these two street punks come through. They come straight to him, try to rob him, and he just ends up killing both of them. And he gets off of the train, runs away, manages to get away just as the police arrive. But he left the groceries behind, and in the groceries is a receipt. And that's how Ochoa narrows it down. So he's got names, a list of names of previous military people. He's got people who have been victims of muggings, and then he's got a receipt that is round the corner from Kersey's house, the D'Agostino's market. And that's how he starts watching Kersey. Now this point in the movie is good because it's more like a manhunt, because he is trying to follow Kersey, but Kersey's still trying to do what he does throughout the movie. And in the end, a part of Kersey gets injured. Ochoa knows it's him. So, and this is another political part of the movie, which is pretty cool, really. Ochoa goes to the mayor and says to him who he thinks it is and what he thinks it is. But the mayor then explains to him that vigilantism is actually bringing crime down. The muggings have slowed down because they're all scared. They don't want to get shot. They want to pull out the gun on you, take what you've got, and not get it back. Again, it's political, isn't it? So the mayor speaks to Ochoa to basically say, look, I know you've got this guy, but I don't want him. I want him to disappear. And the reason of thinking behind that is if the robberies are down and they think he's still out there, will it keep him down for long? There's a belief you're going to lose your life doing what you do. The silly things you do. Would you do it? So Ochoa, he reluctantly agrees with the mayor that crime is down. So people are fighting back as well. The media, because there's constant news reports throughout the film, and the media are saying people are fighting back because people do have enough, don't they? They just reached a point of, right, this ain't happening, I'll do it myself. Yep, is that right? Is that wrong? Well, who knows, but that's the point of this movie, and it gets you asking the question, doesn't it? Is it right? Is it wrong? So in the end, the decision's made that Paul Kersey should be frightened off. And part of that is that he leaves New York and the vigilante case goes unsolved. Because Ochoa, in the beginning, he obviously can't understand what's going on. He's put all this work into catching this guy, doing his job as a detective. And he's finally caught Kersey. And it's a part of that movie, again, is it the controversial part that people, is it right, is it wrong? What do we think of that? So Kersey ends up in the hospital. Ochoa's, because during the movie, obviously Ochoa gets hold of the weapon. So Ochoa basically says to him, look, if you were to leave New York and go to another state, I would make sure this firearm disappeared. Because the firearm obviously will link him to all those murders, because even back then they had ways of telling if it was the same bullet from the same gun and stuff like that, which just ties you. And as you know, powders on your clothing, forensics, that's how they catch you. And he would have been banged to rights for murder. Even though he defended his family and done all that good stuff, he would have been banged to rights. So yeah, that's the political part of the film. Let me know what you think. This is my first review, so but I wanted to review my favourite movie. It's one of those movies, it's gritty. I mean, if you remember the original opening to The Equalizer, the state of the subway, the streets, the grittiness of it, that's this movie. It just gets you thinking. So if you do like this review, I'll be looking to do some more. This is one of my favourite, if not my favourite movie. I will be doing my favourite movies, this is my favourite, but I'll be doing all the movies I really like. Let me know what you think of Deathwish. Obviously seeing the young Jeff Goldblum at the beginning was very, very cool. He only is briefly in it, It was great to see that. The elements of the movie, as I say, the detective and Charles Bronson, he's a great actor, isn't he? And he always played a great tough guy, didn't he, in all his movies. He played a great tough guy character, a mysterious character, didn't he? I liked him in The Mechanic. I think it was Gente, was it? Was another one that was pretty good that I liked. The other Death Wishes I liked. Deathwish 2 was brilliant. Deathwish 3 was a little bit more unrealistic, but it was still a good movie. It was really good. 4 and 5, I quite like them movies. A lot of people downed on them, but I quite liked them. Yeah, So thank you for listening to my review. If you want to hear more, let me know. Like, subscribe, and don't forget to share. You should be sharing in the world. That's what we should do. And if you like the movie or you've got any questions, let me know, and I'll get back to you soon in the next one. Thank you very much.